Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to Circling Seattle Sports on Converge Media. Of course, as always, I'm your host here with you live in the studio at the Black Media Matters studio. Charles Hamaker here with you. The off seasons continue. Luckily, we don't have any coach firings to deal with, any sort of that things. We do have progress on a potential new Seahawks coach. We've got a new rumored deal that's finally been completed, or so that we've been told, and should be having that player signing arrive in a few days. I'm sure if you have been following our Sounders coverage, you know what we're talking about there. Following the Kraken's 8-game winning streak, they're currently on a 4-game losing streak. So if they're nothing but not consistent as of late. The Reign made a couple re-signings of players as they approach their preseason as well. We've got a few other names around the sports teams in the city professionally. The Mariners made some big international signings as the international prospect pool continues to build there. So we'll start, as we always do, with our Seattle Seahawks, who were finally able to begin the interviews with respective offensive and defensive coordinators as they look to find their new head coach after the dismissal of Pete Carroll. So the team completed 8 interviews over the first round of the potential window. Obviously, Dan Quinn is a familiar name amongst the Seattle fan base, considering his time here in Seattle as a defensive coordinator. Helped lead the Atlanta Falcons to a Super Bowl, the one that they lost to the New England Patriots in dramatic fashion, and has recently spent some time with the Dallas Cowboys as their defensive coordinator. Dallas most recently getting knocked out of the playoffs by the Green Bay Packers. Miami Dolphins offensive coordinator Frank Smith. Frank Smith is a guy who came over to help lead the offense in Miami with Mike McDaniel. Their offense has performed really well over the last few years. Carolina Panthers defensive coordinator Ejiro Evero has gotten some attention as well around the league, and he's kind of viewed as a sleeper. The person you see on your screen is Los Angeles Rams defensive coordinator Raheem Morris. Bobby Wagner, in being asked about his potential candidacy for a head coach around the league, not specifically about the Seahawks, gave him his endorsement after Wagner spent 1 season with him. New York Giants offensive coordinator Mike Kafka, who used to be a quarterback actually in the NFL for a bit, a long time backup quarterback, and was a finalist for the Cardinals head coaching job last season, was a interview. Detroit Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson was interviewed. He's been a popular pick around the league as well. The Lions obviously having some success reaching the NFC Championship game this year. He's been popular around circles. Houston Texans offensive coordinator Bobby Slowick was somebody interviewed. And then the last one of the 8, Las Vegas Raiders defensive coordinator Patrick Graham. Only 5 of those 8 first-round candidates were given a second interview with the team. Everybody, it was Quinn, Graham, Evero, Morris, and Kafka. So Ben Johnson, kind of surprisingly, did not get a second interview with the Seahawks. Slowick did not get one. So kind of interesting there to see Johnson. I was a little surprised, just given the success that he's seen with the Lions. I know last week we talked about it. Mike Holmgren told John Schneider to go after an offensive mind, so he would have been at the top of that list. A lot of people are looking at Ravens defensive coordinator Mike McDonald, but he hasn't done any interviews at all. So they might wait. They'll have to wait now until the offseason to interview him. He's been a strong candidate considering how good the Ravens defense has been this year, and just has schemed really well. So in addition, though, to the head coaching job, the Seahawks will need to look for a new offensive coordinator as well. We just talked about some of the offensive minds because Shane Waldron, who was a Seahawks offensive coordinator under Pete Carroll, is working on signing a deal with Chicago Bears to take the same position. So head coach, you'll need to fill that position. You'll need to fill the offensive coordinator position, as well as the fact that John Schneider has said that the team doesn't plan on rebuilding. So, you're going to have to stay competitive. You're going to have to bring a few guys back. Jordan Brooks, Leonard Williams. There are some contract decisions to be made. So it's safe to say it's going to be a really busy offseason for John Schneider and the Seahawks team. And of course, as always, we will be able to keep you up to date with that, whether it's every week here on Circling Seattle Sports on Converge Media or, through our social media posts. And I will drop this in there just so you're able to keep up to date on that. So that's what we've got for the Seahawks right now. If you've been following the NFL world, you'll know that the Lions and the 49ers will play in the NFC Championship game, and the Chiefs and the Ravens will be playing in the AFC Championship game. So if you're going to ask me for my pick, it's anybody but the Niners. I just would not want to deal with that. It would be really cool to see the Lions win a Super Bowl. I know my buddy Everett Fitzhugh would really enjoy that. The Ravens defense has been incredible. Lamar Jackson should win MVP. So, I mean, I also would prefer to not see the Chiefs win a Super Bowl again. So anyway, that's kind of the null point. We'll probably have some more news on the second interviews from those 5 candidates that the Seahawks will be looking at. It's going to be interesting to see how much traction Quinn continues to get, as he's gotten a few second interviews around the league as well outside of the Seahawks. So, a reminder as well that all of these are virtual. The teams can't meet in person until the offseason officially begins after the Super Bowl. So we go from the Seahawks there and all that sort of coaching carousel kind of things. This has been one of the slower, off seasons in terms of coaching changes already in quite some time, which is unique. So it'll be interesting to see how the Seahawks play out and how they make their decisions ultimately to find a new head coach. But we go over to the Mariners here, and their offseason is quiet per se, as we've gone through that. But, these sort of headlines that we're going to go over always look more towards the future of the franchise that we'll see down the road. You think about Julio Rodriguez and his rise to stardom. He came from something like this with the international prospect pool. So we go over here on January 15th. The team welcomed 10 new players on International Prospect Signing Day. Shortstop Dowell Joseph is the biggest name of this group. He was somebody that was really sticking out in terms of the international prospect pool, and somebody that the Mariners had their eye on for quite some time. I believe 8 of these players are from the Dominican Republic. As you can see on your screen there, shortstop Leandro Romero, catcher Gabriel Guanches, right-handed pitcher Anderson Jimenez, infielder/outfielder Diori Castillo, outfielder Manuel de Cesar, catcher Manuel Baez, shortstop Zeus Nunez, left-handed pitcher Eliezer Orbe, and right-handed pitcher David Pena. So, and don't be too concerned seeing a few shortstop on here. Obviously, you don't imagine that some of these players might stay strictly at one position. Julio, didn't always play center field, and you can see where he's at now. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But it's interesting, to look at the International Signing Day with these prospects and realize, there are a few years away. They likely won't spend immediate time in the minors. It's just not realistic. But this could be very well the future of the franchise in a lot of regards, with Julio obviously coming through that. He's the big example to look for with international signing. But this changes a lot of these guys' lives. These guys coming out of the Dominican Republic, 2 of them from Venezuela. So it'll be really interesting to see how these players come up through the prospect pool, whether it's, through the Modesto Nuts, the Everett Aqua Sox, Arkansas, and then eventually Tacoma when they're knocking on the door, to the big leagues with the Mariners. But it's going to be really interesting to see, the Dominican Summer League take place and kind of keeping track of those. And we do all of that as I'll switch over this on CSS Futures. So you'll want to look down at that as well. That's what we've got for the Mariners. Things have been quiet. We don't have any signings. There's still a bunch of free agents currently available on the market. The Mariners have been rumored to be interested in Cody Bellinger. I don't imagine, considering the budget that they've been working with, that's realistic unless Bellinger wants to take less money. Same thing with Snell. I just don't think that's realistic as well. It'd be really cool to have Blake Snell here, considering, how big of a Seattleite he's been and a proponent of Seattle that he's been. But again, with the money that he's asking for and the money that the Mariners have in terms of a budget and that they're working with, it doesn't seem realistic unless he's going to take some sort of pay cut. So That's what we've got for Mariners news. We do finally have some storm related news. It's been a few weeks. The offseason still kind of creeps along. We're slowly approaching free agency and getting through that period. And the draft is a little bit later as well. But we do have some news regarding, at least maybe one potential player coming back. On the 16th, the team extended a qualifying offer to forward Joyner Holmes. Holmes signed a contract through the rest of the season with the Storm on June 3rd this past year. It was technically her second stint with the Storm. Holmes had been brought in the draft by Seattle but didn't stick, and has been with 4 other teams before coming to Seattle. It was a funny occurrence because Holmes was with the Sparks this season and played a game against the Storm. And then a few days later, she was put on waivers and the Storm brought her in. So it was kind of a funny turnaround. As a forward, she brings some good versatility offensively, can stretch the floor a little bit, can shoot the 3 ball, provide some length defensively for this Storm team, which, helps. Seattle throughout the season wanted to talk about being a good defensive team, defense turning into offense. That was something that we heard throughout the course of the season as media, whether it was from Coach Quinn, from Jewel Lloyd, from, again, most of this team. She showed some good flashes after signing with the Storm. Kind of saw her minutes go down as the season went on, and you saw some other players get increased minutes with a few of the other players like Ivana Dojkic leaving, Gabby Williams being hurt. There was, roster shuffling was wild for the Storm last season, obviously, in that year. But she showed some flashes. She showed some really good flashes. It was great to see that versatility offensively for a Storm team that, if Jewel Lloyd wasn't going offensively, they relatively struggled for most games. So having different options, having the ability to look different places for offense was great. It'll be very unique to see. I talked to a few folks in the Storm press corps to see if she's able to carve her way into a real spot this year with this team. Obviously, the Storm have a few players they need to add to be a competitive playoff team this year, but they have, I've been very positive and very optimistic about the Storm roster. Really liked what Jordan Horson brought as a rookie defensively and on the offensive end as she gained confidence throughout the course of the year. We know how great Jewel Lloyd is and what she's able to bring. Ezzy Magbagor continues to take steps forward. You're going to have Sammy Wood come back. The impact she brings offensively, the veteran mindset that she's able to bring. Kia Nurse, we saw her and what she's able to bring as a scorer. So it's going to be very. I really liked what I saw from Jade Melbourne as well, and as we'll talk about Melbourne. Sorry, we'll talk about her in a second as well. So I saw positive flashes. Obviously, you're going to need to add some veterans. Going to need to add, some bigger names if you're going to become more competitive this year. But I have hope. I have hope and I have optimism. So we'll go from there. We do have some news regarding international play for some of our Storm players here. 3 current Storm players and 1 former were named to Australia's Olympic qualification squad. Ezzy Magbagor, Sammy Whitcomb, Jade Melbourne, and Storm legend Lauren Jackson. It's incredible to see that she's still playing. We're all named to Australia's squad that will be trying to qualify for the Olympics. That will be really fun to see. That tournament is going to be in Brazil next month. So the 7 consulting Opals will take on Germany, Serbia, and Brazil next month. So it'll be interesting to see the Opals as they go to battle there. I know that former Storm player Steph Talbot was in some of the rosters leading into this squad being named, but she did not ultimately end up making the final roster here that these former Storm players did. So from that, we also got one more. January 22nd, this morning, guard Jewel Lloyd was named to USA Women's Basketball's February training camp roster. It's a 3-day camp taking place in Brooklyn, New York. Former Storm player Brianna Stewart. I was hoping that one day Kelsey Plum would be a Storm player, but former Washington Husky Kelsey Plum was also named to this roster as well. So, obviously, considering the year that Jewel Lloyd has and the talent that Jewel Lloyd has, the skill year in and year out, makes sense to see that as well. So that's what we've got in terms of Storm-related news. It's not a ton to go over and a ton to go off of. You'd like to get more. I'm really looking forward to free agency and talking about that leading into this 2024 season. Looking forward to the new team's training facility in Inner Bay as well. hopefully sooner rather than later, we're able to go and take a look at that and show you guys that. But that's what we've got for now. Again, of course, as always, as we get news, you'll want to follow us all everywhere just so you can get this news in real time. And then obviously we talk about it every Monday here on Circling Seattle Sports on Converge Media. So that's what we've got for storm-related news. I don't know how to qualify this Sounders week because we've got some smaller bits and pieces. We'll start with the big one. On January 21st, we got a report from Sounder at Hearts, Jeremiah Oshan, that Pedro de La Vega signing is now totally complete, and he's due to be in Seattle on Tuesday to meet with the team. That is tomorrow. So the team has a few days of training before they leave for Spain for their preseason camp. So it's nice to have him be able to come here. I know there was a minor injury that he suffered in Argentina's camp. So being able to have him here and meet the team and then go to them with that trip in Spain should be good. As obviously you'd like to get that chemistry, that bonding going before we get to the real season happening. De La Vega should be an exciting sighting. You know, obviously there's all been this talk about him leading into the year. And over the last few weeks, ever since we had, well, even before the Sounders end of the season press conference. So that's something that's going to be fun to see. And I'm excited to get guys out to training so we can cover that. Speaking of covering that, our guy, Rio Giancarlo, one of our photographers here at Circling Seattle Sports, was down at the training the other day to get some of these photos. So I wanted to just show that off there so you can see some of the photos. It's also really cool. And I know I've got the throwback hat here. I got to get some of the newer merch there as well. To see the new crest in action, whether I know it's just the training wear that they've got on in these, but it's still very exciting to see. Albert Rusnak's been an exciting piece of training early on. Seeing him play in more of a natural position after, the last few years he's been kind of stuck out of position has been good to see. And I imagine he's going to have a good year this year with the Sounders, even though some of the fan base doesn't like him. Nice to see Christian Roldan and, that's Alex Roldan. I apologize. And João Paulo can only talk about how excellent he's been throughout the years for Seattle after signing here. Alex Roldan obviously signing an extension this offseason as well. And then just a few more here. You see Rusnak. You can see, I think it's Jordan Morris in there, João Paulo. So shout out to our guy Rio for that. In other news, on January 15th, Nuhu did not play in Cameroon's AFCON opener, unfortunately. So hopefully we'll maybe see Nuhu back sooner rather than later. We'll see on that. That's what we've got here for Sounders. They do have training the next few days. They've got training today, tomorrow, and to be determined Wednesday, but then the players will depart for Marbella, Spain on the 25th of this month and then be gone. They'll play some friendlies in Spain, get some game action in there. So it'll be exciting to see that as well. So we go from our Sounders related news over to the Kraken. And like I said at the top of the show, not doing too hot as of recently, our Kraken. That 6-game road trip, the first 3 games good. You push the winning streak really high. Oh, wait, it might have been a 9-game winning streak. I apologize. Wait, let me double check that 9-game winning streak. Yeah, pretty sure it was 9. Yep, 9-game winning streak. I apologize. That's my fault. Got things mixed up there. So, yeah, that stopped on the last 3 games of the road trip here, losing last Monday to the Pittsburgh Penguins, as we were talking to you here, recording last week, getting shut out 3-0. Seattle really wasn't able to generate much of anything in this game. A couple mistakes defensively ended up playing a factor into this one, as Pittsburgh took advantage of that, and good on them for doing so. Made it tough on Joey Decord to do much of anything against them. I mean, really can't blame him on either of the 2 ones. And then Pittsburgh got one on the empty net there. So just a tough one. And obviously with shutouts, we don't give out players at the game. The next day, so that was the first game of back-to-back, and Seattle was already banged up, and we'll talk about that here in a second. Against the New York Rangers, one of the best teams in the East, Seattle really couldn't do much going on in that one. As a whole, I mean, they were able to get 2 goals. Jordan Eberle is our player of the game. He scored one of them, 1 goal, 1 assist, 2 points, and 3 shots on the day. Jared McCann had the other one on a power play late into this one when it really was too far out of reach. The banged up Kraken team that we'll talk about here in a second couldn't do too much against the East. Obviously you'd think that if they'd had a full roster, they could, and I imagine that they would. But ultimately that wasn't the case. Then a few days off after that back-to-back, and to wrap up the road trip against a Pacific Division rival in the Edmonton Oilers. This game was tight. The Kraken played the Oilers pretty tight. An old empty net goal here at the end kind of wraps things up. But Seattle ultimately not able to keep up enough, still banged up, still dealing with injuries, and ultimately it results in the loss to Edmonton. I went again with our player of the game on Jared McCann. I almost went with Jordan Eberle in this one as well. But McCann in this one goal, 1 ± 3 shots, and a 60% faceoff win percentage with the injuries, with some of the stuff that the Kraken have been dealing with over the past few weeks. Even McCann has been stepping into the center role, something that he has done a little bit throughout the course of his career, but not a ton. But he's, just having him step up in that regard is pretty big in and of itself. So I'm pretty sure it was an empty net goal. No, it was a power play goal late. Sorry. So yeah, still, kept things pretty close late into the game. Power play goal late finished things off. There was a bit of roughness and festivities late that we'll address here in a second after we go over the last game of the week and our player of the week. And it ultimately left Seattle without another key player going into the first game of a 4-game homestand in the 4th game of the current losing streak. Seattle came back to Climate Pledge Arena yesterday, Sunday, January 21st, losing to the Toronto Maple Leafs by a score of 3-1. Toronto got the empty net goal late. Seattle, kind of the same story as the other few games, ultimately wasn't able to do enough on the offensive end with a banged up team to compete with one of the better teams in the entire league against Toronto. Toronto was coming off of the second game. Toronto was in the second game of a back-to-back. They had played Vancouver the night before, but was ultimately not able to take advantage of that. There were a bunch of different opportunities for Seattle to get on the board. Ilya Samsonov, who's struggled this year for most of the season, played pretty good. So even when Seattle got opportunities and got shots on goal against Samsonov, he was in the right place at the right time. So it just, things not going their way. A couple mistakes defensively for the Kraken gives Toronto their 2 goals. And we're sitting here looking at a 4-game losing streak now. This game included some festivities as well, but none that have resulted in suspensions so far. Connor Timmins of the Toronto Maple Leafs did receive the maximum fine allowed for a hit that sent Brandon Tanev into the end boards. It was a pretty bad hit, and it resulted in this melee that you can see on your screen as captured by a photographer on site, Rio Giancarlo. Our player of the game in this one, goaltender Joey Daccord. Joey, 23 saves and a 920 save percentage. Joey's still big in this one, even though the offense is struggling, even though the team is without several key players. Daccord just, continues to keep his team in the game and continues to have a great season. So our player of the game, it could have gone with Joey. I feel like if we go with Joey week, every week it's going to get boring. I went with Jordan Eberle. Jordan Eberle, a guy that is dealing with some of the stuff that's happening that, again, we'll talk about here in a second, but didn't miss any of the games over the past week, which included 4 games, 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 points, 5 shots, and 1 block. Him and that McCann and Tatar line has been great, and that was the only line that stayed consistent last night in that loss against Toronto, as there was a bunch of line movement with all of the injuries and such. So in case you're not aware, Kraken are dealing with a few injuries. I think we might have talked about it last week before the game against the Penguins, but the team was without Andre Burakovsky and Matty Beniers, and Vince Dunn was listed out as well without an injury designation. Matty Beniers would be placed on injury reserve that day I don't think that was designated either. But we believe it's an upper body injury, considering the hit that he took from Cole Sillinger in the win over Columbus during the road trip. We haven't seen Matty on the ice. He was around the locker room yesterday, but he just popped in quick in and out 2 days ago. I apologize. But that was all we've seen of him. He hasn't been skating. I didn't see him yesterday in morning skate, even in the locker room. So hoping he's back quicker as opposed to a long-term outage. And Andre Burakovsky did return in the loss to Edmonton, so he's back, which is nice. Just the injuries, man, whether it's with this team, Berkey's had his bad luck with injuries as well. And then Vince Dunn. So Vince Dunn hasn't been given an official designation either. He was practicing out in full gear ahead of the team's practice on Saturday. He was kind of not using his left hand. And I imagine that's, if we're going to speculate, it's part of the job. If we're going to speculate, I believe it's a left hand injury because everything else, he skated pretty normally, but he just avoided using his left hand. And, considering the fight that he got in with Cole Sillinger trying to defend Matty Beniers after that hit that I just mentioned he took against Columbus, it makes a ton of sense. So it'll be interesting to see what's going on with that hand. Dave Haxtell, when he talked about Dunn, sounded more optimistic than, pessimistic about the injury. And he skated pretty well ahead of the practice on Saturday. He didn't practice at all. Didn't see him at all on the ice on Sunday, though, whether it was ahead of morning skate or for morning skate. So that'll be something to keep an eye on as well. A few players have been dealing with an illness that's been going around the locker room. The illness took Adam Larson out for the rest of the game during the road. One of the games during the road trip. Jaden Schwartz and Jordan Eberle were dealing with it, but both of them still played yesterday against the Maple Leafs. Kyler Yamamoto did not. He was a scratch, but we believe he's dealing with that illness as well. When asked about it yesterday in morning skate, Dave Haxtell said they're not quite home free yet from that. So that's still dealing with the locker room. So you've got guys that are legitimately hurt physically. You've got guys dealing with illness. It's not great. It's not great for the Kraken right now as they continue the skid, as we are just 4 Chicago, Columbus, St. Louis, San Jose. We're 4 games ahead of the All-Star break. So you're hoping to get healthy. And you got a few teams who have been struggling ahead of you to potentially be able to do that. So the only thing we've got here, excuse me. In the team-related news section, is that for John Hayden was recalled from the AHL Coachella Valley Firebirds as a corresponding move to Matty Beniers being placed on injured reserve. Otherwise, it's around that time of the year where we get to the Seattle Sports Star of the Year Awards put on by the Seattle Sports Commission. Every year, Seattle Sports Commission puts together nominees for different awards, specifically in the categories of the, Men's Sports Star of the Year, Women's Sports Star of the Year, and the Sports Story of the Year. Now, the Kraken had 2 different nominees in the 2 different votes. Matty Beniers was as a nominee for the Men's Sports Star of the Year for his Calder Trophy winning campaign. And the Kraken as a whole, from last year's group that went into the playoffs, took the Dallas Stars in round 2 all the way to game 7, are nominated for the Sports Story of the Year. On Saturday, after practice, we caught up with Philip Grubauer, who was obviously big throughout the playoff run and throughout the course of the season for that playoff team, and alternate captain Yanni Gourde, who, again, another big impact player, to talk about that and what it really means for this Kraken team to be nominated for this award. So we'll go to those 2 videos right now.
Was really important for the organization and for the city as well. That was really special to be a part of. Obviously, being nominated for that is a huge honor, not just for the individual guys, just because the organization. So for the organization, I speak here, and it's awesome.
Can you speak a little bit to last year's team's performance? Obviously, it kind of some people off guard and really made some noise in the playoffs. You've made your respective playoff runs in the past. What can you say about the team's push to the playoffs and then those incredible 2 rounds?
Does some have to pay for? I don't think we had to start. We wanted to last year at the beginning of the season, but then we came together as a team and figured it out, and had a couple important games, like one of the most
open source video transcoder.
Road game that
they got a pineapple.
We won like 8 in a row or 7 in a row. So
Yeah, because
That was really
I think
important
you've
to put
seen
us in a
now,
spot
and then
to
was
be
it a
able
few
to
weeks
even
ago?
play in the
I just
playoffs and
get to
fight for a
present it
playoff
if it's
spot.
not a
And then,
certain size.
yeah, we took it over from there,
And that
playing
helps.
Colorado in the first round and
Because then
having
otherwise I have to make sure I click the little thing.
battling with them till like game 7 was pretty
Yeah, before,
important
because
and
I
pretty
didn't
special to the guys.
remember that
And
they had the
this
cinema
group
layout.
hasn't experienced that, and was huge.
I just sit there awkwardly in the corner,
sports culture inspire you to be a better athlete? Because you've been around at a few different events.
I'm like, well,
seen some of these
people can
athletes
technically
in
see me
action
still,
and,
so can't do nothing stupid.
and some collaborations between the teams. But how does this stage sports culture inspire you to be a better version of yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable when you look at Seattle and how the fans care about the sports team and with what passion they go into it, and being a part of a Seattle sports team. It's an incredible honor, and obviously we want to represent them, Seattle, the city, and the organization in the best way possible on and off the ice, and even in the summer. Yeah. My favorite sports memory in the city, I think, was winning the first playoff home game here last year, or even Game 7 with the team. That was incredible. I don't think that has happened too many times before, and I think my favorite sports moment as a fan is just like sitting in the baseball stadium watching baseball. Obviously, I love football too, and watching a couple football games. So there's not one that points out to me. Baseball, when the Mariners made the playoffs, that was extremely nerve-wracking as a fan. So definitely a moment I can look back to.
If I had to have you switch with a different Seattle sports team for a single game, whether it's the Sounders, the Seahawks, you've been to a few Seahawks games, you mentioned the Mariners, what team would you want to suit up for a day in this city?
Well, I would love to suit up for the Mariners. I got to know a couple guys in the staff in the back, and then obviously we were down there for the Winter Classic, got to know the equipment staff down there pretty well. So I would love to be a part of a Mariners game. I got to throw the first pitch, so that was special. But I would love to get down there on the field and actually hit one or throw one or catch one.
About it a little bit, I think at Winter Classic. But do you think you would be a catcher, just because it would translate, or?
And when I played that MLB celebrity softball game in Denver, I went 2 for 2 on the hits. So maybe I could hit a couple, but it would definitely be more natural as a catcher. Hey, Seattle sports fans, vote now.
It's very nice to hear that we're in the nomination. Everybody worked super hard last year to get to where we were at the end of the year, and now we played as a team last year, and it was a lot of fun. And I think the most fun we've had together as a group was last year in the playoff. It was terrific, and the fans were so much. They were so behind us, and it was amazing.
And can you speak a little bit more to the performance of the team? Obviously, the 8-game road trip was so big, as well as the 2 playoff rounds. Beating Colorado in 7, pushing Dallas to 7. Just the performance of this team, because you've been on cup-winning teams. You know what it takes to get to the playoffs and play in the Stanley Cup playoffs.
I think it was huge. I think it was such a team effort. Everybody contributed throughout the season. We needed every guy in this locker room, and that's what made this team so unique. Is it wasn't 1 or 2 guys. It was a whole group, and everyone sacrificing towards one goal, and it was to win games, and it reflected very well on this team and how we played as a group. And I thought that was the biggest thing for us last year was how united and how close we were, and we wanted to win at any price.
You've been to a few different events, not related to the Kraken around the city. Obviously, sounding the siren at UW was a little bit fun. How does the Washington sports culture inspire you to be a better athlete, just because of all of the great athletics that we have in this state?
Yeah, it's awesome playing here in this environment. Just seeing how much the fan love their sports here, and witnessing it firsthand from the first game here in the Climate Pledge to the playoff run last year. It makes me want to get better, and every single day makes me want to improve and help my team win. Eventually, that's the end goal, and that's what you want. And I think just the Seattle they're so great with their sports, and they're so their fans are amazing. So it's a lot of fun playing here. My favorite as a Kraken would be the first game here. I think the atmosphere was so much fun. It was great. It was electric. I took the first face off of the game, and it was very, very special moment in that first game here in Seattle. Yeah, it might have been the sounding the siren at the U-Wash game before this year. I think it was a lot of fun, and again, the atmosphere, it's so electric in that building. It's so cool, and being able to do that, it was a lot of fun. Hey, Kraken fan, vote now at seattlesports.org.
Nailed it.
Yeah, I mean, you saw from Yanni. So it's the last day of the public vote for the Seattle Sports Star of the Year awards. As I mentioned, Sports Story of the Year, the Kraken, last year's team nominated for that award, along with 4 other nominees. Matty Beniers, for his Calder Trophy winning campaign last year, is nominated for the Men's Sports Star of the Year award. Again, 4 other nominees as well. And then the Women's Sports Star of the Year awards. One of them is in the Reign segment that we'll talk about here in a second. But so that ends today. So by the time you're watching this, once you're done with it, or I mean, if you've got access to a second screen, of course, seattlesports.org, as Yanni just said, and they did the little extended his arms thing. God bless him. I totally forgot. He's suspended for 2 games. So you saw that happy smile. Yeah, he got suspended for 2 games for a charging hit in that Edmonton game that was a little funky. Seattle fans are a little upset, and I think it's more because of the fact that Yanni's suspension came so quickly as compared to when Kraken players have been hit dirty this season. The suspension's kind of the ruling from the league has dragged on, and it hasn't necessarily been fair compared to other hits around the league. So funny way to follow up Yanni there. Still, he's awesome. But yes, seattlesports.org. You'll be able to vote there. It's the final day of the public vote, so get those votes in. Otherwise, that will wrap up our Kraken segment. We'll go over to the next 3 games here of the next week. All 3 of them will help wrap up a homestand before 1 road game the following week before the All-Star break. So next week, starting January 24th versus the Chicago Blackhawks. That game at Climate Pledge Arena, 7 o'clock start time. It is on TNT and Max, so we're not on Root that game, so be aware of that for your streaming purposes. The Kraken now sit at a 19-win, 18-loss, 9 overtime loss record, 6th in the Pacific Division, falling behind Edmonton and behind Calgary at the moment with 47 points. After that, on Friday, January 26th, they will play the St. Louis Blues at 7 o'clock Pacific time. And then to wrap things up on Sunday, they will host Cole Sillinger, who the Kraken got into a fight with, more specifically Vince Dunn, and the Columbus Blue Jackets on the 28th with a 6 p.m. puck drop. So 3 teams that have relatively struggled this year so far. They still got talent, so don't fall into that trap. But definitely teams that, as you're a roster that's ailing from injury and illness, you can hopefully be able to take advantage of and get yourself back into the win column ahead of the All-Star break. We shift over to the Reign, and I apologize. I don't have a hat for the Reign yet because none of the merch is back out yet. I didn't have a hat of the old OG logo. So you get to see the Chrome Dome for this segment. So we go over to the Reign here. You know, we're still in the off season. We're still working our way towards preseason as well. I believe NWSL teams can start their preseason this upcoming week, actually, which is exciting. But we've got a few different pieces of news, and we've got some rumors. Well, not so much rumors considering they came directly from General Manager Leslie Galmore, but a few important things. Firstly, on the 17th of the month, the team officially re-signed forward Ziara King. There was rumors about it. There was hopes like, hey, when's Z back? Especially considering that she is now married to midfielder Jess Fishlock. We did get that confirmation on the 17th, re-signing her through the 2024 season. She was a restricted free agent and now enters her 4th season with the Reign. Throughout her first 3 seasons with the club, King has appeared in 44 matches, tallying 3 goals, 2 assists, and 45 shots. In Challenge Cup play, which, if you remember, the Challenge Cup no longer exists as a tournament. It's just a game played between the Shield winner and the NWSL champion before the season, which is kind of interesting. King had notched 1 goal and 2 assists in 14 appearances in Challenge Cup play. So, Galmore in the press release from the Reign said that Z is still early in her career, and we know with continued investment, she can be a player who consistently impacts games on both sides of the ball. So Galmore obviously showing, a lot of hope for the future of what Z brings, with the talented forward group that the Reign have had for the last few years. She's kind of got stuck on the depth chart. So it's exciting, obviously, to see her come back, given the talent that she's got, selected 8th overall by the Utah Royals back in 2020, and be able to see that more on display this season. So there was that news, and we shift over that to a local. The Reign re-signed midfielder Nikki Stanton through the 2024 season as well. Announced on the 18th, so a day later. Stanton was an unrestricted free agent, so it wasn't necessarily clear if she was coming back this year. She's been in the league since 2014, spending the last 2 seasons with the Reign. Obviously, it's exciting to have a hometown player come back, born in North Bend, Washington. She's a 10-year veteran now, was traded to the Reign from the Red Stars ahead of the 2022 season, and since then has totaled 42 appearances across all competitions in NWSL play. During this last year's regular season, she made 15 appearances and recorded 2 assists, which was tied for the second most on the team, adding 31 duels won, 11 interceptions, and 9 tackles won. The midfielder also appeared in 6 games of Challenge Cup play, as we just talked about with the Challenge Cup, no longer exists as a tournament, totaling the 3rd most minutes on the roster at 482. In the press release from the club, general manager Leslie Galmore said that she provides a level of experience that we value, a defensive presence that positively impacts games, and an uplifting attitude that is infectious. So that's specifically, you talk about Nikki Stanton. Her defensive play is so strong. And in so many of the games where the Reign really needed to buckle down and close things out, they brought on Nikki late to help impact that. So there were those 2 moves, which is great. It's great as you fill out the roster. Obviously, when Rose Lavelle and Emily Sonnet decided to sign with Gotham instead of coming back to the Reign, that was a big blow, and people were how do I say this nicely? A little overreactive about the club. They thought that the club was going to fold. We saw some comments about that, which was never going to happen. They were worried that this was not a roster that was going to compete. And it's still a really competitive roster. Mind you that, again, we love Rose Lavelle here. Rose only played a few matches this season. Emily Sonnet is more who I'd be worried about losing, considering her defensive impact through the course of the entire year. But I trust in Laura Harvey. I trust in Leslie Galmore. Speaking of which, the club is rumored to have 3 signings in the works as of this moment, 1 coming sooner rather than the other 2. The other 2 will probably come throughout the course of the year. As they sound like 2 international players, first reported by our friend Bella Munson. So it'll be interesting with that. Everybody obviously worried again with Lavelle and Sana not coming back, but it sounds like the club is working to bring in some bigger name talent to help bolster this roster and keep it competitive in a league that continues to grow and continues to remain extremely competitive. In the parity is just great. So, in addition to that, on the 19th, we got 3 straight days of Reign news. The club announced that for the 2024 preseason, beginning with players reporting to the training grounds at Starfire on Wednesday this week, on the 24th. After that, they'll travel to Newport Beach, California for training camp, and then they'll later go on to Costa Rica to continue preseason training. In a release from the team, Leslie Galmore, general manager, said that this time together away from market is key for the team and staff to be able to focus on setting the tone for the season. So obviously wanting to foster, that winning mentality, grow the bonds there and the chemistry. The team will train, and this is funny because it's in the official release from the club, in the warmer climate of Southern California through January 30th before departing to Costa Rica to continue preseason training. I don't know why I said it like that. Uh, the Rain will train at the facility of one of the most successful clubs from Costa Rica, Liga Deportiva, until the 10th of February. So interesting. I know in past years they've trained down in California, so seeing Costa Rica added is fun as well. So that about wraps things up for this week's episode of Circling Seattle Sports on Converge Media. Obviously, again, the Seahawks coaching search, I don't imagine it'll be done anytime soon. You know, we've got second interviews with 5 of those 8 candidates that the team got first interviews with. But, you know, there's still a few names. I know that there's reports that the team is interested in speaking with Mike Vrabel. They haven't scheduled an interview yet. You know, there's all that talk. The Mariners, you know, there's a few more players, I believe, that are rumored to sign in the international signing class. So we'll get to that next week. The Storm as well. I don't know how much stuff we'll be able to see over the next week. You know, again, obviously with free agency slowly creeping towards us, that'll be the big bang. But outside of that, you know, we've got a little bit of a ways to go before the draft itself. So we've got some time there. With the Sounders, we will likely in the next maybe even hours see an official news release from the Sounders about Pedro de La Vega, hopefully, as they continue training. They got training today, but we didn't get news about that until recording, so that didn't help too much. The Kraken are looking to snap their 4-game losing streak as they have 3 more games left in this 4-game homestand and 4 games left until the All-Star break, which leaks into the next week. The Rain, you know, we might hear some more things in the coming weeks about a potential signing, but obviously they'll report in a few days and then head down to California to begin their preseason as well. So exciting news all around, exciting to get into it. You know, we're slowly approaching spring, and it's exciting as we look forward to that and how busy the spring will get for us. So until we see you next week, what is that, the 29th of January? I get to the end of the month. Take care of yourselves, be well, and do whatever you can to make today a great day. I'll see you then.